So there's a lot of Venezuelans that live in Ecuador, and if you ask most Venezuelans what they think of the government of Maduro, they're going to tell you that they're fed up, and they want anything to be able to change the government. Unfortunately, that's not how it usually works. I'm sure a lot of Americans during the Bush dictatorship would have been glad to have had a bloody revolution to overturn any illegitimate president that we didn't like, but it doesn't work out that way. So you have this guy, Juan Guaido, a politician in the Venezuelan Assembly, in January. He declared himself president. So it's kind of like Al Capone redux, gangster light. And he has the whole backing of Washington and CNN and the whole media establishment behind him. But nobody voted for him. There wasn't an election. It's interesting how the United States works in Latin America. There's been cases where the United States has sent death squads to Latin America because Washington didn't like the government that the people elected. And you would have presidents and vice presidents saying, we're holding elections. But then their gangsters and thugs would be waiting in the background, and if people didn't vote the way Washington wanted, then they'd all get killed. So, and there's also been times where there's been a president and then we do a switcheroo and put a general in. So this idea that Washington is interested in promoting democracy in Latin America is just ridiculous. In many cases, like in the case of Cuba, the communism comes about as a reaction to extreme dictatorships, puppet governments from Washington. And this creates a vacuum and allows socialism to come in. If the United States gets involved in Venezuela, it's going to make the situation a lot worse. Okay? America's mission to the Middle East and to the Holy Land, even Europe through the 90s and early 2000s, was laudably praised as examples of the societies bringing a new era of humanitarian intervention to the world. And you even heard this a lot on Catholic radio, where they said that war shouldn't be criticized too hastily because this is an example of the church interacting in the world. Okay? That's not that different when you think about it from the theology of liberation. Okay? But if a theology of liberation is presented as an alternative to traditional Catholic soteriology, it is indeed a heresy. Any kind of attempt at postmodern replacement of traditional Catholicism runs the risk of being vulnerable to a caricature of a priest holding a machine gun in his hand. The just war theory, though, which is very similar when you think about it, played over and over again on American Catholic radio, was promoted by very prominent Catholic scholars through several American ministrations. It's not even necessary, though, to have a revolution like they're thinking about it. But it's interesting how when it's the little guy that's wanting to fight for his rights, it's demonized as caricature of a priest with a machine gun in his hand. But if it's a chaplain that's working for the U.S. military, it has all the backing of the Augustinian theology behind it. Okay? I don't think it's necessary to have a bloody revolution, though, because all we need is to have an information revolution. And this is where you come up against a lot of resistance, because people say, I think we need to focus on the heavenly world and not get too wrapped up in temporary causes. And when people say that, it's usually it's a tricky way out of more complicated argument. There's a subtext that runs something like this. I can't believe it's true what you're saying, because if it really were true that inside job terror and where the wars were happening, certainly doing nothing would be equal to being in the same camp as the Germans who turned the other way as their fellow humans bake. But to avoid looking at the details, an upper-level argument is erected as a smoke screen. So I know that people are saying one thing, but they're really meaning another thing when they object to wanting to get involved politically. The bottom line isn't a philosophy of non-intervention. The philosophy, in other words, it's a disagreement with what's happening, but they know that they're not going to win talking with you about the details, and so this upper-level argument is erected. So you hear a lot of people in the U.S., when you try to talk to them, they say they don't want to get involved, or Calvinist idea, everything has to happen because this is according to prophecy, the future is determined. But I would say that we don't need a bloody revolution if we can just have an information revolution. But the theology of liberation can undergird an information revolution.